Back in 2021, UFOs were all over the news. Headlines boasted that you could now read the CIA's entire collection of UFO documents online, like approximately almost 3,000 pages of these documents detailing the government entity's findings on UFOs were made available for anybody to read and download thanks to a Freedom of Information Act filing being granted. Well folks, I'm here today to talk about the stories over the years that have proved the government knows that there's something in those skies, be it UFO, alien, or unknown. For starters, back in 2023, so just last year, 3 military veterans testified in Congress's highly anticipated hearing on UFOs, including a former Air Force intelligence officer who claimed the US government had operated a secret multi-decade reverse engineering program of recovered vessels. He also mentioned that the US had recovered non-human biologics from alleged crash sites. Mainly there were calls to remove the stigma for aviators who report UFO sightings and to ensure oversight of government programs that investigate them. Retired Major David Grush, who went from being a part of the Pentagon's UAP, another word for UFO, task force to becoming a whistleblower, told the House Oversight Committee's National Security Subcommittee that he had been denied access to some government UFO programs, but that he knows the exact locations of those that are in the US possession. In response to public interest and political pressure, federal and military agencies have shared a trove of information about unexplained aircraft encounters. Grush also alleged that the US has retrieved, like I said before, non-human biological matter from the pilots of the crafts, adding that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program that he talked to, that are currently still on the program. While he refrained from sharing any further information in the public hearing, he did offer to disclose details behind closed doors. He said he hasn't personally seen any alien vehicles or bodies, but his opinions are based on the accounts of over 40 witnesses he interviewed over 4 years in his role with the task force. He's like, look, my testimony is based on information I've been given by folks with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to the country. A lot of them who shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified testimony. He also mentioned that that trove of evidence has intentionally been kept secret from Congress. He mentioned to the panel that he and not one, not two, but several other colleagues have been the targets of administrative hell, and that he's feared for his life since coming forward. He's just like, it's brutal, it's very unfortunate, and a lot of the tactics used to hurt him professionally and personally kind of sucked. Now, there is an open investigation into the matter. The subcommittee also heard testimony from former Navy fighter pilot Ryan Graves and retired Commander David Fravor about their alleged encounters with aircrafts of an unknown origin. Graves recounted an incident with a flying object off the coast of Virginia Beach in 2014. While flying an F-18, he said he came upon an aircraft that looked like a dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere that he estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter and unlike anything he's ever seen. He claimed that this UFO could remain stationary despite hurricane force winds. He told folks that his squadron submitted a safety report, but they got no official acknowledgement of the incident. Also, according to him, UFO encounters in that region weren't exactly rare or isolated. Now, he has since founded Americans for Safe Aerospace, a group that supports aviators who have reported UFOs. He said that the objects that are reportedly being seen by military and commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities. He's like, if everybody could see what he saw, our national conversation would change. Project Magnet was a UFO study program established by Transport Canada in December of 1950 under the direction of Wilbert Brockhouse-Smith, senior radio engineer for Transport Canada's Broadcast and Measurement section. He made a request to use the facilities of the Department of Transport to study UFOs, and it was formally approved on December 2nd of 1950 with the intention to collect data about UFOs and apply any recovered data to practical engineering and technology. The ultimate goal of the project was to apply any findings on the subject of geomagnetism to the possibility of exploiting Earth's magnetic field as a source of propulsion for vehicles. Now, he and his colleagues in the government believed that UFOs might hold a key to this new source of power, which, it was a small-scale undertaking. It used those facilities, and it did have some assistance from personnel at the Defense Research Board and the National Research Council. In June of 1952, Smith issued a preliminary report arguing that UFOs likely came from intelligent extraterrestrial sources and almost certainly manipulated magnetism for flight. And he reiterated it again in a report in 1953. Also back to 1952, I think it was April, the Canadian government established Project Second Story, a parallel UFO research project with Smith also involved. Now, this consisted of a group of scientists and military officers who met periodically to consider the UFO question and to recommend government action. Smith reported to Second Story on some of Project Magnet's findings and conclusions. He believed that UFOs were linked to psychic phenomena and believed himself to be in contact with extraterrestrial beings who communicated with him through telepathy, which not uncommon for aliens. He wrote a number of articles for Topside, the publication of the Ottawa New Sciences Club, which he founded, outlining the philosophy of the Space Brothers. These are the folks who we claim to be in contact with. They were later collected and they were published posthumously in 1969 under the title The Boys from Topside. Now back to 1952, in October, Smith set up an observatory at Shirley's Bay outside of Ottawa to study reports of UFO sightings, believing that UFOs would emit physical characteristics that could be measured. A number of sighting reports were investigated by Project Magnet, but in 1954 the project was shut down. But Smith was allowed to use the facilities with his own funding and did so until he passed in 1962. Sean Kirkpatrick is a physicist and former intelligence official who, until last December, headed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. You know, the Pentagon office that Congress was like, you, find me answers. He recently published an op-ed in Scientific American called Here's What I Learned as the US Government's UFO Hunter. So, I'd consider that a pretty good thing to read. He mentioned on a podcast that Congress really gave the office two main missions. There was an operational mission, which was to investigate contemporary sightings with military pilots, operators, and sensors to kind of understand what's happening in our domain. And the second was a historical mission, which was to look at everything the United States government has done on aliens, UFOs. We're talking going back to 1945, as well as investigate all these hidden programs that the government's been keeping from Congress. All the ones that investigate UFOs or reverse engineer things. Yeah, let's look into that. So in that historical mission, anybody who had previously signed non-disclosure agreements that protected classified information, they were allowed to come in if they thought they had something that was helpful. Why? Well, to tell the office, so the office could investigate. The group had access to the National Archives, they had all military service archives, they had crazy stuff, all the NASA stuff. They would go so far back and be like, hey, you named something? Yeah, what was that? What was it? How did that relate to this? Document everything, track it down. So, obviously, a lot of programs got named, and they're all classified, but apparently the guys working on this, they found everything, reported it all back up to Congress, so when are we getting those details? Please? We all know the Roswell hullabaloo, but if we break down all the government coverage about that chaos, it proves they're hiding something. So, a report released in 1994 concluded that the material recovered in 1947 was likely, keyword here, debris from Project Mogul, a military surveillance program employing high-altitude balloons and classified portions of an unclassified New York University project by atmospheric researchers. A scholarly consensus emerged concluding that the military had decided to conceal the true purpose of the crash device, which was allegedly nuclear test monitoring. And instead they're like, hey everybody, it's a weather balloon. Now this balloon had allegedly been launched from a different Army airfield a month earlier, and it was carrying a radar reflector and classified sensors for experimental monitoring of testing. Now, these Air Force reports were dismissed by experts because it's kind of implausible. Now look, at the end of the day, let's try and count how many times the government changed their tale. And they expected us to believe them every time? Because for me, it screams scrambling to cover up aliens. Okay, I know, you need more information. Well, how about this? Let's consult Edgar Mitchell. An Apollo astronaut, passed away in 2018, and he had a lot of theories about aliens that he shared with the public. He believed they were very much real, and that UFOs have visited us before, publicly stating that he thought there was a cover-up involving aliens and their visits to Earth. As the sixth man to walk on the moon and a NASA astronaut, his theories and beliefs are among the most credible of UFO believers. So when he started speaking out in the 90s, he said, I'm only coming out now with this knowledge because I don't want to be labeled a UFO crank. But he stood by his beliefs no matter how much he was criticized. In an interview in 1996, he said there were alien bodies at Roswell, but the government covered it up. In 1998, he called on Washington, D.C. to acknowledge publicly what it knew about alien life. He said he had witnesses he knew personally from intelligence agencies and the military who convinced him the government had been covering up UFOs for 50 years, including Roswell. 2008, he was interviewed and he talked about how this was real and aliens have contacted humans multiple times. Now, interestingly, his beliefs were in line with those of Philip James Corso, who was chief of U.S. Counterintelligence Corp in Rome in the 1940s and the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk in the 60s, who wrote a book the day after Roswell, where he also said that he moved alien artifacts from the Roswell crash, which were later reverse engineered to develop more of our advanced technology. Look, I could go on and on for ages. And finally, today, J. Allen Hynek was initially a skeptic of flying saucers and came to believe over the course of the top secret project that he was on that serious investigation of UFOs was a legitimate scientific endeavor. He acted as scientific advisor to UFO studies undertaken by the US Air Force under 3 projects: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and the very famous Project Blue Book. He studied UFO reports and decided whether the phenomena described therein suggested known astronomical projects. So when he was originally hired, he was skeptical. He was like, okay, all these reports are made by unreliable witnesses, or you've misidentified something that already exists. He's like, oh, it's all ridiculous, and it's a fad that's gonna pass. So let's just fast forward a little bit. 1953, he's now an associate member of the the Robertson panel, which concluded that, well, I don't know, maybe we should take a PR campaign to debunk the subject. He would later, regret his decision because apparently that panel helped make UFOs a disreputable field of study. So let's fast forward. 1969, Project Blue Book is shuttered, and Hynek was one of the few people who conceded that some UFO cases could simply defy explanation. So today he's known as the father of ufology, who coined the phrase close encounter. Now, 1985, people are like, okay, it was an interview. They were asking him, why'd you change your mind? He's like, well, there was two things. One was the completely negative and unyielding attitude of the Air Force, because they wouldn't give UFOs the chance of existing, even if they were flying up and down the street in broad daylight. He began to resent the whole everything had to have an explanation, because at first he was like, okay, yeah. But then he's like, no, you can't assume everything's just the way it is. Also, the caliber of witnesses was troubling him. A lot of them were military pilots, and he's like, maybe there is something to all this after all. I'll be honest with y'all, before today, I had written off crop circles as entirely man-made legends that only serve to discredit alien discourse, but then I went down a heck of a rabbit hole. I'm not even gonna tell you how many hours I spent on the internet, but what I learned completely changed my point of view. So, question for you, do you believe crop circles are the work of aliens? Let me know in the comments and let's see if I can prove what I learned. Back in 2017, hundreds of circles in the ground of the Amazon rainforest that date back thousands of years were discovered, but scientists didn't know what purpose they served. So, the rainforest has long been thought of as a pristine ecosystem that was untouched by humans before the Europeans arrived, but new research actually showed that something manipulated the landscape many centuries before their arrival. Modern deforestation in the Amazon led to the discovery of more than 450 geometrically shaped ditches, known as geoglyphs, which occupy roughly 13,000 square kilometers in the Acre state of Brazil. These circular geoglyphs went unnoticed for centuries because they were covered by trees, but now, thanks to deforestation, they're visible from the air. But here's the thing, researchers don't know what function they served. Archaeologists didn't find enough artifacts to determine it was a village, and the design make a defensive or military purpose kind of unlikely. So if you're a regular around here, you already know that I have a theory that aliens used hieroglyphs as a way to communicate with humans many years ago, and now that it's fallen out of regular conversation with humans, aliens can't communicate with us as easily. So for folks like me who believe that, hieroglyphs appearing to resemble planes and helicopters and artwork done thousands of years ago, they've been hailed as unequivocal proof that the ancient Egyptians were visited by beings who brought them advanced technology from the future, or just came to say hello, with a lot of supporters of the theory, myself included, saying if the ancient civilization was putting helicopters and modern spacecrafts in their work, then they must have seen them or at least observed images of them. Why can't crop circles be the same, like the ones made by aliens? It's a way to send us important messages, kind of like a big billboard, but the sad thing is we just can't understand. But now we have proof that's been happening for much longer than most people think. Speaking of which, the first ever crop circle ever reported was in 1678 in the Mowing Devil, or Strange News out of Hertfordshire, which was an English woodcut pamphlet. According to the reporting, a farmer and crop mower were arguing up the cost of harvesting the farmer's oat field. The farmer was furious at the mower's price and stormed off swearing that the devil himself should harvest the crop, which, I get it. Prices are expensive. The economy sucks. Well, that night, a dazzling light lit up the oat field, and in the morning, the farmer discovered perfectly round circles in his crops. And he was so terrified because he thought it was only, neatly mowed by the devil or some infernal spirit. And he was like, yep, I'm not gonna harvest that. He abandoned it. He's like, My take? The aliens watching from afar saw the perfect opportunity to show off their abilities and help a human out. Sadly, Buddy didn't receive the message well because he couldn't translate it. I wonder which side of the argument the aliens were siding with by sending the message. I'm assuming they were probably trying to warn humans against messing with the devil, since I'd hope by now we all know that, that's bad. But back in the 1600s, I don't think it was even illegal to have coitus with the devil yet or demons. It is now, but it took a while. Don't ask how I know this, I know way too much about things. Back in 2013, an elaborate crop circle in a barley field about 6 miles southeast of Salinas appeared to have landed from out of nowhere when a YouTube video depicting its discovery made its way onto the lovely interwebs. And by late afternoon on the day that it went up, news of the circle outside of Cholar had drawn up quite a few curious onlookers from throughout the valley. Stamped right in the middle of the field, the design covered about an acre and looked like a strange computer chip with dots in the middle that had some folks thinking maybe it's Braille, maybe it's Morse code, maybe the aliens are evolving their language. Now, a lot of folks were like, it's a hoax. But with the landowner being like, I don't know, I don't want this, the theories were kind of multiplying, kind of like rabbits. Security guards were, outside of the property by Monday morning. It was they were being a little hush-hush about who their client was, but they were like, we're here to just stop this circus. We don't want it, not fun, which only adds to the credibility in my book. Now, they did lead reporters to the circle because they were like, well, if you're gonna be here, you might as well at least see it. And apparently from the ground level, it didn't look like a lot, just like trampled on grass, cut at different angles. The property does belong to Scott and Debbie Anthony, and apparently at the time, Debbie was sick in bed. Somebody tried to call her and she's like, yeah, I heard about this. I don't know. I haven't been out there. Leave me alone. A man who identified himself as Hector at the ranch office said, like, I haven't even been able to get out there to inspect the design. So, I know. Back to the YouTube video. Two men appear to drive along the canyon road before sunrise and they see flashing lights in a field. They get out of the car, hop a fence, which don't do that, folks, and they enter the cultivated field. And they're like, dude, are you seeing this? Among the first people to spot the crop circle from above, not just the ground, were Julie and Pat Belanger, co-owners of the 11th Aerial Photography Squadron Company. They were apparently flying in a Robinson R44 helicopter from the South County Airport in San Martin towards Carmel when they were like, that's interesting. Apparently that area is normally not super exciting to fly through, but then they were like, whoa. Well, that's new. Well, what do you got going on here? According to Julie, who has been doing photography for 20 years, specifically aerial photography, she's never seen anything like it. Joe Pizzini, the chief operating officer of Ocean Mist Farms, which is one of the largest growers in the area, was like, I've never heard about crop circles around here before. What's going on with this? Look, I'm just saying, if you don't want a media circus, odds are it's more real. How about we fast forward to 2015 to this crop circle in Massachusetts? It was barely visible from the road, but a crop circle that appeared in a field off of Old Gray Station Road back and then got a lot of attention. A longtime crop circle researcher in Massachusetts was determined to figure out if the circle was produced by an energy force or if it was man-made. Nancy Talbot said, I asked folks to take some samples. By the way, she's one of the 3 founders of BLT Research Team Incorporated, which is a crop circle research group, which I didn't even know existed until today. According to her, they haven't had a lot of background with hay, but she can normally tell by a few plant examples if the circle is real. Oh, BLT, by the way, not a sandwich. It stands for the last names of the 3 people who created the research company: John Burke, William Levengood, and Talbot. Burke, a New York businessman, and Talbot, a music producer with some research background, helped to gather the data that Levengood, a biophysicist, used to make findings about the mysteries. By the way, the location of this one is the exact field where a crop circle was found about 2 years ago, around the same time of year. Now, it's possible that the energy that creates non-man-made crop circles is drawn to certain earth features, such as limestone under the soil or a nearby water supply. Like, for example, crop circles found in Europe are often located in areas where there are chalk deposits underground. Talbot said research has shown that a crop circle that is not man-made, made by aliens, exhibits changes to plants inside the circle when compared to the same type of plants outside the circle, but from the same field. So it changes their chemistry. Talbot began investigating and researching crop circles like 25 years ago when she read an article about them appearing in fields in Europe. And the team's interest was like, okay, what's causing these? If it's not man-made, what's doing it? Aliens! She organized field teams around the world because, well, these crop circles were starting to pop up everywhere. And the changes that occurred, regardless of what country they were in, the same basic changes were consistent when you compare the sample plants from inside the circle to the ones that were outside of it. Researchers determined that the plants inside were exposed to brief bursts of intense radiation, like microseconds, and that's not normal. Apparently the radiation kind of turns the moisture inside the plant stems into steam, and then the steam expands. And that expansion and the buildup of steam blows a hole in the lower stem nodes, which are tougher material. And in the top nodes of the plants, which are more pliable, the stem stretches and often bends. The research results indicate that when the findings show the plant node changes, it's not mechanical pressure that caused the circle. It wasn't something that landed there. Now the research goes even further to explain the burst of energy as well as changes in the soil that include magnetic materials only visible under a microscope, and changes to seed from seed crops where circles have been found. According to Talbot, there have been numerous misrepresentations about crop circles and what creates them. But this way she can be like, okay, this one was man-made, you're just a little too creative with your lawnmower, and what's real? So, if aliens exist, and how could there not be life forms out there? Some of them might come down here periodically. And if there are alien creatures, they're out there. There's an assumption that life forms from somewhere else would be like us. Some might be, some might not be. It could just be the plasma is being directed towards the surface of the Earth to get our attention, like a calling card. Now, it doesn't have to be a threatening, hostile, aggressive act. And look, personally speaking, out of all the instances and cases that I researched for today, this was the one that caught my attention the most and got my brain going. We have science out here proving the difference between hoaxes and crop circles created by unknown beings. What more could you ask for? Okay, only specifically when it comes to crop circles. We don't have time to go through my alien wish list. Damn thing is as long as a Sears wish book by now. And if you'll allow me, I'm gonna end today with a little bit of a deviance, and that's how the governments around the world are trying to cover up that crop circles are real to further discredit true believers. Colin Andrews, a British researcher and former investigator for the British Ministry of Defense, claims that he was approached by a CIA operative who tried to convince him to publicly state that crop circles were a hoax. He believes that this was part of a larger effort to discredit the phenomenon and discourage serious investigation. Other researchers point to the involvement of individuals connected to intelligence agency in the crop circle community. They argue that these individuals are used to spread disinformation and confuse the public about the true nature of them. Whether these claims hold any truth or not, the presence of intelligence agencies in the debate surrounding crop circles raises questions about their motives and the role they play in shaping public opinion. One of the key figures in the crop circle phenomenon is John Lundberg, the founder of CircleMakers.org. He claims responsibility for creating many of the intricate and elaborate crop formations that have puzzled researchers and enthusiasts for years. But some folks believe that his work is part of a disinformation campaign orchestrated by intelligence agencies. According to these researchers, Lundberg and his group, known as the Circle Makers, are funded and supported by intelligence agencies to create these crop circles that are so elaborate and spread the disinformation. They argue that Lundberg's close association with those agencies and the highly choreographed nature of his circle creations suggest a deeper agenda at play. Now, while it is difficult to prove or disprove these claims, the presence of individuals like Lundberg within the crop circle community raise a lot of questions about the authenticity and underlying motives of formations. It's a reminder that not everything is as it seems and that the truth might be a little complex. We're only 4 months into 2024 and the space news is already a-flowing. I know I've been a little quiet on the alien theories front lately, but I think it's time we ramp things up again to put the pressure back on NASA and all those governmental bodies around the world to release what they know for once and for all. Question for you. What do you think the government's been hiding this year? Let me know in the comments and let's see what I've sleuthed out. Alright, let's kick off today with the obvious, and remember those aliens that were spotted a couple of months ago? Yes, because if we didn't have enough craziness to worry about in 2024, may I offer you 10-foot tall creatures of the unknown? Here's the thing, anything over 7 feet tall is already terrifying to me personally. Ditto for aliens on their own, no matter what they look like. Combine the two, eat! My worst nightmare. We've got a video. Lucky us. It shows 2 human-like creatures on top of a hill at an island in Brazil, and it got a heck of a lot of traction on social media. According to a New York Post report, the beings were 10 foot tall and spotted at Ilha do Mel, an island more than 3 kilometers off the coast of southeast Brazil. It is a favorite spot for environmentally conscious travelers and beach lovers, and it's celebrated for its varied ecosystems. Spanning a simple little 5 kilometers in length, 800 meters in width, the island presents a scenic mosaic of natural marvels. So we've got one creature, and then we've got another one. The outlet's like, they're here, and their appearance on the hilltop, it caused a lot of chitter chatter. You can see the creatures. They stand confidently on top of the hill, which, according to locals, it's hard to get there, and the shrubbery barely reaches their knees. As you see them walk, you can see them swinging their arms in a human-like manner, but like not enough to convince anybody, you know what I mean? Now, when I watched the video, we've got a witness that was like, it's just too big to be a person. Look at the way he moves. It's really weird. Look at that, it's very fast. For me, it's just enough to see the speed with which this creature goes down a hill. Like, anybody who's done trails on hills knows that you don't go down a hill in 1 to 2 minutes. And this was according to an Instagram user. Somebody else was like, the way they move reminds me a lot of the Men in Black. And I agree with this next one. One thing I do know, I will never step foot there again. Or for me, forever. Even the Brazilian government was like, yeah, no, we're not quite sure what they are. I believe they said on Twitter, surreal what happened on Ilha do Mel. Great summer at Paran is another story, and even strange beings came to check it out. Which, alright, I don't know. I feel like it's another government cover-up, and I feel like I'm about to say that a lot today, because, hi, there hasn't really been anything else in the news. Before we talk more about aliens, how about we touch on some black hole discoveries? Well, I didn't say today was gonna be all aliens. 2 teams using NASA's James Webb Space Telescope have studied the exceptionally luminous galaxy titled GN-Z11, which we're gonna call it GN for short. And this thing only existed when our 13.8 billion year old universe was only about 430 million years old, so just a little one. This galaxy is one of the youngest and most distant ever observed. And also, with it being so bright, it's kind of challenging for scientists to understand why. But we're getting some secrets now. We're peeling back the covers. The team found the first clear evidence that the galaxy is hosting a central supermassive black hole that is rapidly accumulating matter. This finding makes this the farthest active supermassive black hole spotted to date. We've got a quote from the principal investigator, Roberto Maiolino. He said, "We found extremely dense gas that is common in the vicinity of the supermassive black holes accreting gas," which I know. Kind of redundant, but I like a direct quote. He is of the Cavendish Laboratory and the Kavli Institute of Cosmology at the University of Cambridge in the UK. Yes, that's a lot of words, I know. Using this lovely telescope, the team also found indications of ionized chemical elements typically observed near accreting supermassive black holes. So, more evidence. Also, they discovered a super powerful wind being expelled by the galaxy, and such high velocity winds are typically driven by processes associated with vigorously accreting supermassive black holes. I know, I'm saying it again and again, but It's so cool! Together, the evidence shows that GN hosts a 2 million solar mass, supermassive black hole in a very active phase of consuming matter, which is why it's so luminous. Now, Cummins Team 2, also led by Maiolino, used the near-infrared spectrograph, or NIRSPEC for short, to find a gaseous clump of helium in the halo surrounding GN. Now, according to experts, the fact that we don't see anything beyond helium suggests that this clump must be fairly pristine. Finding the never-before-seen population 3 stars, which are the first generation of stars formed almost entirely from hydrogen and helium, is one of the most important goals of modern astrophysics. These stars are anticipated to be very massive, very luminous, and very hot, and their expected signature is the presence of ionized helium and the absence of chemical elements heavier than helium. The formation of the first stars and galaxies marks a fundamental shift in cosmic history, during which the universe evolved from a dark and relatively simple state into the highly structured and complex environment we see today. Look, if you don't find that cool, come on! Okay, before I forget, we have another former government whistleblower that I don't think I've talked about on here before. So when Sean Kirkpatrick worked in the Pentagon as the top official overseeing the tracking of UFOs, he told his leadership that the department wasn't telling the public enough about the mysterious aircrafts or the government's efforts to investigate them. By the way, sorry, I totally forgot. Kirkpatrick served from July of 2022 until December of last year as the first ever director of the Pentagon office dedicated to investigating reports of UFOs. So Sean knows what he's talking about. He also mentioned in interviews that his former boss, Deputy Secretary Kathleen Hicks, was supportive of his efforts as UFO chief, but his attempts to engage the media always met internal resistance in the staffing process. He only did like 2 on-camera interviews during his 18 months in office. Yes, he also conducted 2 print interviews, including with Politico, which, don't worry, we'll talk about more, and a couple of off-camera media briefings, but like, not a lot. There was a very strong concern to engage in the public discourse as often as he thought they needed to. And the fact that the Pentagon leadership couldn't figure out how to get that message without concern for spillage into other areas, it kind of frustrated Sean. Now, he made those comments after Politico reached out for a response to a Defense Department Inspector General report back in January, which concluded the Pentagon's efforts to identify UFOs, and it said what? Well, they're uncoordinated, and they could have overlooked threats to the US. Also, fun little plot twist here, Eric Pahan, a Pentagon spokesperson, disputed the claim that the department declined the UFO chief's media request. I don't know, I'm smelling a cover-up. Do y'all remember the Miami Mall aliens? Good old malls, usually home to Rugrats, senior walking groups, and the most annoying families you will ever encounter. Trust me, I used to work retail at a fairly large mall. I don't like going to them unless I've got my headphones on. But apparently on the first day of this 2024 year, the Miami Mall, over in Florida, might just have been home to something a little more out of this world. I know. Come on, Alexa, get to the official story. Apparently, a group of roughly 50 youths caused a riot at the Bayside Marketplace, which is an outdoor mall roughly 5 miles away from South Beach. This is all according to the Miami Police Department, by the way. They were setting off fireworks, which led to quite the panic, as a lot of folks were like, this could be worse. And the statement also came from the public information officer, Michael Vega. At this point, 4 folks were arrested. Police were dispatched for crowd control because, well, people didn't want to leave, people were panicking, they closed businesses because yikes. But here's the thing, some people spotted aliens. Now obviously the police are saying there was no aliens, no airports were closed, nothing's being withheld from the public. LOL. I don't know, folks. That's what people in power always say. I believe that statement as far as I can throw it. So in the days after the first, folks on social media launched a speculation frenzy, honing in on what they described as aliens. Some suggested that the police were actually responding to like an alien invasion, an alien visit, and not youths. Several people reviewed video of the incident circulating online and claimed they could see an alien figure in the grating footage. And then everybody else was like, let's post a meme. To quote a post I saw on the app formerly known as Twitter, it said, 10-foot aliens creatures caught on camera, fired at inside and outside Miami Mall, media silent, cops are covering it up, saying young people were fighting with fireworks, yet all these cop cars and air traffic stops that night except for black military choppers and no media coverage. Wow, I feel like I'm getting a nasty case of deja vu. Anybody else? Clips taken from the viral video went, well, even more viral on social media, claiming that 8 to 10 foot tall alien creatures were seen. Now, the low quality clip appears to show a tall glowing figure near police vehicles. Look, I've seen videos that were less likely to be aliens turn out to be worth something in terms of being the genuine article, so I'm not dismissing it. Here's an idea, chew on this. What if every Florida Man photo or meme was just an alien trying to blend in here on Earth and failing? Chew on that. And finally, for today, let's go back to last month. I believe it was during the weekend of March 9th and 10th, where Rock Springs City Attorney and longtime UFO investigator Richard Beckwith spotted something kind of strange in the Wyoming sky. He called it unlike anything else he had ever seen in his career. Thankfully for us, he captured the event on camera. He was like, "I've never seen a UFO before I made this recording." So we do have the footage. I'd like you folks to watch it, and to me it looks like a mix of yellowish, reddish, and orange spacecrafts that are all flying together and they're all radiating lights. They're definitely flying in a way that doesn't make any logical sense when you consider human technology for aircrafts, unless the military wants to fess up right now about any tech they haven't told us about yet, and I'm including drones in my comparison. I've seen enough of the amateur and professional models of those little devices in action to know that this isn't that. So late in the evening on March 9th, Beckwith received a call from a friend who lives near Green River, which is about 15 miles southwest of Rock Springs. He grabbed his camera, his tripod, and what he witnessed was quite a shock. He watched the object pulsate. It was moving very rapidly from side to side. Now, he isn't trying to prove the object was an alien spacecraft, he just wants an answer. Look, I know what I'm seeing. It looks like an alien spacecraft. He was like, "I've received a couple of leads, but I don't have any evidence." He has requested radar records from the FAA, and he's contacted other witnesses. He's like, maybe gathering all this information is gonna help me find a reasonable explanation, or maybe determine if it truly is a UFO. So we do have a quote from him. He said, "Using the locations of two different groups of witnesses, including myself, the angle and the distance between the two, and trigonometry, I should be able to pretty easily determine the location and get a good estimate of the size of the object." But as of the time of that quote, he had no idea what it was. Math ain't my strong suit, so I'm gonna trust him on that. Last I heard, he's still hunting. I wish him luck getting those radar records, because not gonna be easy. He's also been pleading for anybody with more information to email him, and I bet by now, he's probably regretting that. Oh, his poor inbox. Across the ages and tucked away in the hidden corners of our world lie very mysterious artifacts that defy explanation, challenging our understanding of history itself. From ancient mechanisms with unbelievable sophistication to mysterious figures that hint at otherworldly visitors, these objects invite us to question what we truly know. Join us as we delve into the shadows of the past to uncover the top 5 mysterious artifacts that some believe offer undeniable proof of alien existence. Are these relics mere products of human ingenuity, or do they hold the keys to extraterrestrial encounters? Well, let's take a look and find out. Starting off today, we have the aluminum wedge of Aiud. This aluminum wedge is a curious object that was found in Romania back in 1974. Imagine someone digging in the ground and stumbling upon a metal object only to discover that it's not just any piece of metal, but one that seems to defy explanation. The wedge is made of aluminum, and what makes it particularly mystifying is that it was found with ancient mastodon bones, which are like the bones of a big prehistoric elephant. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Tests on the wedge could suggest it's about 250,000 years old. Very puzzling, because humans weren't known to create or use aluminum until much more recently, like just over 200 years ago. Aluminum requires a very complex process to make, so finding such an old aluminum object is absolutely baffling. Because of its age and the context in which it was found, some people think the wedge might point to advanced ancient civilizations that we know nothing about, or even to visitors from outer space who left it behind. They wonder if these might be the only plausible explanations for such an anachronistic artifact. However, scientists and archaeologists are generally skeptical, which I guess is a good place to be when you're in the scientific field. They usually look for more ordinary explanations before jumping to conclusions about ancient astronauts or lost civilizations. In the case of the aluminum wedge of Aiud, they question whether the dating might be incorrect or if the context of its discovery might have been misunderstood. They suggest it could be a more recent object that somehow ended up buried with much older bones. In simple terms, while the wedge is a real head scratcher that invites some absolutely wild theories, most experts do believe there is likely a down-to-earth explanation, even if we haven't figured it out yet. It's definitely a great example of how mysterious findings can spark our imagination about the past, but we do also need to carefully examine the evidence before we jump to conclusions, alright? We're looking for answers here, not just ideas. Coming up next today, we have the Dogu figures.
These figures are intriguing little statues that were made thousands of years ago during the Jomon period in ancient Japan, which lasted from about 14,000 BC to 300 BC. These clay figures are often small enough to hold in your hand and have some very distinctive features that definitely make them stand out. They typically have large, wide eyes, small arms and legs, and very intricate patterns or decorations on their bodies. Some people who are fascinated by UFOs and the ideas of ancient aliens visiting Earth long ago think that these figures look a little bit like modern astronauts. They point to the figures' big eyes, which could resemble the helmets of a spacesuit, and their detailed layered designs that might look similar to a suit's protective gear. These enthusiasts speculate that these figures could be artistic depictions of beings from other planets that ancient people might have encountered. On the other hand, experts in history and archaeology see the figures a little bit differently. They usually interpret these figures as having a significant role in the cultural and spiritual life of the people of the time. Many people believe that they served as effigies in religious rituals, possibly to pray for good health, fertility, or bountiful harvests. The large eyes and elaborate designs might have held symbolic meanings, or they were meant to embody certain deities or spirits linked to these aspects of life. Despite the mystery and speculation surrounding them, most scholars agree that these are important artifacts from Japan's ancient past. They provide us with a glimpse into the artistry, beliefs, and everyday concerns of the people who lived thousands of years ago, whether or not their origins are as otherworldly as some might hope. Next up today we have the Abydos helicopter. The Abydos helicopter is a name given to a set of carvings found in an ancient Egyptian temple that some people think look like modern machines. These carvings are on a wall in a temple built by Pharaoh Seti I and later added to by his son Ramesses II in Abydos, one of Egypt's ancient cities. When some people look at these carvings, they see shapes that remind them of a helicopter, a submarine, and even a zeppelin, which I definitely had to look up. It's a type of airship. Because of this, some folks who enjoy thinking about ancient mysteries and the possibility of aliens visiting Earth long ago believe these carvings might be proof that ancient Egyptians either knew about these future technologies or were visited by beings from other planets who had such technology. However, experts who study ancient Egypt for a living, known as Egyptologists, have a much simpler explanation. They tell us that what we're seeing is basically an ancient version of a typo. The wall had inscription from Seti I's time, and then years later, Ramesses II decided to change them. When the new inscriptions were carved over the old ones, bits and pieces of both ended up showing up at the same time. This overlapping made some new, unintentional shapes that just happened to look a bit like modern vehicles to some people. I guess when you're doing ancient hieroglyphs, you don't have an eraser. In short, while the idea of ancient Egyptians knowing about helicopters or getting a visit from time travelers is very exciting, experts believe it might just be a case of old carvings mixing together and our brains just trying to make sense of the jumbled shapes by seeing them as something familiar. I mean, it definitely does make a lot of sense. Next up today we have the Tassili Niger paintings. These paintings are ancient artworks found on rock walls in the Sahara Desert of Algeria. They are thought to be up to 12,000 years old, which places them in the Neolithic or the New Stone Age, which is a period when humans were transitioning from hunting and gathering to farming and settling in communities. Among these paintings, there are some very peculiar figures that stand out, of course, or else we really wouldn't be talking about it. They are much larger than the human figures depicted and have big, round heads that some say look like helmets. Their bodies appear to be covered in some kind of gear, leading to very imaginative theories that these could be depictions of beings from another planet, hence the nickname the Great Martians. However, experts in archaeology explain these figures a little differently. They suggest that these are not literal representations, but rather symbolic ones. The large size and distinctive features could signify importance or power, much like how religious or mythological figures are often depicted in art throughout human history. The round heads and gear might represent ceremonial masks and attire, not spacesuits. Not only this, but the astronaut interpretation largely comes from a modern perspective, influenced by our fascination with space travel and science fiction, and to the people who created these paintings, the figures likely had a significant spiritual or mythological meaning, possibly representing gods, spirits, or ancestors. Or maybe it really was aliens. I mean, at the end of the day, I wasn't there, so who am I to say? And finally, ending off our list today, we have the Saqqara bird, probably the most famous out of all of these we've spoken about today. The Saqqara bird is a small bird-like artifact that was discovered over a century ago in an ancient Egyptian tomb. Despite its age, dating back more than 2,000 years, it has a design that reminds people of modern airplanes or gliders, especially when you look at the shape of its wings, which seem to be designed just right for flying through the air. This has made some people wonder if there's more to the Saqqara bird than meets the eye. They speculate that maybe this wasn't just a simple toy or piece of art. Instead, they think it might be a model of an aircraft, hinting that ancient Egyptians might have known about or even seen flying machines, possibly shown to them by visitors from outer space. However, this is not necessarily the common view among experts, alright? The experts always come in, they're party poopers for our fun theories. Most archaeologists and historians who study ancient Egypt believed that the Saqqara bird was likely a symbolic object or toy. They think it was meant to represent a bird, which had significant cultural and spiritual meaning in ancient Egyptian society, rather than being a model of an aircraft. Despite the intriguing design, there is no concrete evidence to suggest it was anything more than a representation of birds that the Egyptians were familiar with in their everyday lives. But I do have one question, and that is, how were they able to make it fly, okay? How did they know? I'm not saying it was aliens, but I know the ancient Egyptians were absolutely brilliant, but I just want to know a little more, alright? I'm just a little curious. If only we could speak to just one ancient Egyptian person.